Okay, good morning, everyone. So a very warm welcome to, I think we had a problem with the sound. I think it's okay now. Yes. So a very warm welcome to the third day of the Vision Zero Fund High-Level Forum, which today is focusing really on collective action. And I would like to very warmly welcome you to this session on improving occupational safety and health in global supply chains, what works to secure safe and healthy working conditions in global supply chains. Before giving or introducing you to our distinguished panelists for this session, I would just like to briefly introduce myself. So I'm Geeta Rollins. I'm the head of the ILO's Multinational Enterprises and Enterprise Engagement Unit, which is the unit that provides policy advice and technical support for the implementation of the ILO's instrument on responsible and inclusive business, the ILO Tripartite Declaration of Principles concerning multinational enterprises and social policy. And we do this at the global, regional, and country levels. And this instrument also plays a central role in the ILO's engagement with multinational enterprises on decent work. My unit also coordinates the engagement of the ILO on responsible business with other leading international instruments in this area, such as the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights and the OECD M&E Guidelines and the UN Global Compact. The M&E Declaration outlines roles and responsibilities of different actors in encouraging the positive contribution of business to socioeconomic development and decent work for all, and in minimizing and resolving potential negative impacts of business. As such, the declaration has recommendations addressed to governments of home and host countries of multinationals, enterprises, multinational and national enterprises, and social partners. And it also highlights the importance of collaboration, social dialogue, and interaction amongst all of these actors to achieve decent work for all. The M&E Declaration has a detailed set of principles in many different areas of decent work, including on occupational safety and health, with recommendations addressed to governments, employers, workers, and multinational enterprises and national enterprises. We do not have the time, of course, to go into the detailed guidance of this instrument, but today's panel is in a way an illustration of the different actors coming together and addressing occupational safety and health, specifically in operations of businesses around the world. So the purpose of this panel is indeed to take a closer look at the role that the different actors should or could play in driving improvements in safety and health in global supply chains. We will hear from representatives of governments, from consuming and producing countries, home and host countries of multinational enterprises. We will also hear from representatives of the social partners, specifically employers in the form of the International Organization of Employers, and from the workers in the form of the International Trade Union Confederation and a global union, namely Industrial. And we will also hear from a multinational enterprise represented here by Nike. Before starting the panel discussion, I would just like to recall a few housekeeping matters. As in the previous sessions, simultaneous interpretation is provided in English, French, and Spanish, and you can access that interpretation by using the icon on the bottom of your screen. We like this also to be a very interactive session, so I invite you during the panel discussion already to post any questions you may have in the Q&A box. And then we will look at them and we will liaise on these questions with the different panelists of the session. We will not be using the chat box for Q&A. So please don't use the chat box. We will not be able to use that one for any questions and answers. The panel is foreseen to have 2 rounds of questions for the panelists. Then we open the floor for the questions of participants, and then we will have brief closing remarks, and all of this in 1.5-hour session. So difficult task for me as the moderator. So now I will have the pleasure to introduce the distinguished panelists for this session. We have Antonio Camarota, Principal Administrator in DG Employment of the European Commission. Warm welcome to you, Antonio. Mr. Omar Estefan, Director General for Social Welfare, Secretary of Labor and Social Welfare of Mexico. Warm welcome to you, Omar. Very early for you, still in the morning, so we're very pleased to have you on the panel. Then we have Mr. Matthias Thorns, who is the Deputy Secretary General at the International Organization of Employers, with us in Geneva, so easier for you, Matthias, to join us. Then we have Siti Chok Hakuntut from the Director Safety, Health and Environment of Nike. And for him, it's even earlier in the morning, so a really warm welcome to you, Chok. We have Papa Kwasi Dankwa, Legal Officer of the International Trade Union Confederation. Good morning to you as well. And finally, Mr. Glenn Mfane, Director of Mining, Diamond, Gem, Ornament and Jewelry Processing at the Global Union Industrial. Good morning to you as well and a warm welcome. So let me turn to the first speaker of the panel discussion this morning, Mr. Antonio Camarota. Occupational safety and health is a high priority for the European Union. And this not only within the EU and its member states as well, but also in countries with which the EU has trade relations. So what concrete actions has the European Commission taken or is planning to take to make worldwide progress on occupational safety and health and reducing work-related accidents and occupational diseases? Antonio, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, thank you for inviting the Commission to the European Commission to attend this important meeting. I would like to first of all start by saying that we have a common concern. We share a common commitment as regards ensuring that changes in the world of work and also in general terms the processes of globalization could be seized and turn into new opportunities for all in both advanced and emerging economies. So this is something that we have discussed on several occasions with ILO, and the European Commission is fully committed to promoting political approaches to be sure that this can become a reality. Of course, the first thing I would like to say is that for the European Commission and for the EU, because the European Commission is officially is representing the European Union in all the external relations. For us, it's very important to continue developing the social and decent work dimension in different areas, not only in the social areas, in the area of occupational safety and health, but also in the area of trade, of development, of enlargement, and also of neighborhood policies. It is clear that in a more and more globalized world, the promotion of international occupational safety and health, we come back to our specific area of OSH standards and of a global culture of prevention is crucial. And in our view, not only to ensure compliance with social rights principles, but also for the promotion of fair and innovative trade and investment policies. I think that, and I will conclude then this first round by saying that we can be quite proud of what we are doing because we are making progress in this field. In particular, as regards the area of global supply chains, in this area, but not only in this area, as regards in general, the better HOSH at global level, we have developing new instruments. For instance, I would like to mention here the last generation of EU trade agreements, which include chapters on trade and sustainable development, including, of course, OSH. And these are for us an important priority, and maybe we will come back to this later, is also in the future we are going to develop this our policy in the area of external relations to promote OSH everywhere. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Antonio, for sharing these actions of the European Union, which actually situate itself at various levels, which of course is really interesting. It's not just what's happening within the EU, but also how the EU is basically using trade agreements and specifically sustainable trade for sustainable development chapters within those trade agreements to also support, at the one hand, trading partners, but also put specific expectations on trading partners. And indeed, maybe that is an element we can further focus on a bit later, what this also means then for companies operating with supply chains in various countries and then importing in certain markets. So I would now like to turn to Mr. Omar Estefan of the government of Mexico. And of course, Mexico is an important exporting country and has trade agreements with many various partners. Your ministry, of course, has an important role in ensuring that occupational safety and health standards are respected in countries across Mexico. So not just for those, of course, that are exporting, but basically across Mexico. But could you share with us what steps the Mexican government has taken to improve workplace safety and health in the country? And in that context, also highlight the role that trade agreements indeed can play or are playing in making progress in this area of occupational safety and health. Omar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Gita. First of all, I would like to thank the ILO for the invitation, of course, and say hello to my fellow panelists. It is truly an honor to be with you today. And yeah, as you were saying, Gita, the recently approved USMCA, the Free Trade Agreement between Mexico, the United States, and Canada, created a new set of labor-related obligations, which were put at the core of the agreement by including a new labor chapter and not a side agreement as NAFTA, the previous treaty, did. Of course, even before the ratification of the USMCA, Mexico had already ratified ILO's Convention 98 on the right to organize and collective bargain, and also Convention 87 on freedom of association. These two elements, of course, set or ensure a legitimate collective defense of workers' rights, promoting best practices of safety and health in workplaces. Workers get involved through dialogue, and they also get achievements through negotiation. This context subjected Mexico to the full scrutiny of the ILO's monitoring system regarding compliance with norms. Moreover, Mexico's domestic laws were already aligned with international labor standards that were emphasized in the treaty in USMCA. But as if the political context was not enough, of course, the pandemic has also led both employers and workers to focus on occupational health and safety as one of the main topics of the previous months. And with labor compliance in general and occupational health and safety regulations in particular moving to the center of the discussion, of course, both employers and workers have reached out to the labor ministry with a renewed interest to ensure not only proper compliance, but also a public recognition of the labor policies which are being implemented in workplaces as a means to differentiate themselves amongst others or between different firms. So along with the publication of several regulations and COVID-19 guides aimed at specific sectors, for example, a guideline for the agricultural sector, which then served in part as basis for ILO's practical guide for the prevention and mitigation of COVID-19 in agriculture. We have also developed an ecosystem of certifications and voluntary labor inspections aligned with the major ASRE compliance standards. ISO 2600, for example, UN Global Compact, OECD's MENES guideline, among others. This system has allowed for an appointment-based inspection to verify that a specific workplace complies with the different obligations incumbents have. So this goes all the way from social security to training obligations, and of course also that occupational health and safety standards are being met. The geopolitical context has, of course, proven to be an opportunity in the particular case of Mexico that has led to a renewed trust between government and incumbents. This allows or has allowed labor inspection to visit even more workplaces, thus ensuring improved labor conditions, and the private sector to have not only reputational benefits, which are very important within the context of the treaty, but also the certainty that their labor practices comply with the law, which is, of course, very important. But of course, any program can only be effective if social dialogue and better mechanisms of collective bargaining are met, which generate recognition and effectiveness of the rights established in the ILO conventions, which are, of course, based on well-founded commitments, which, of course, in the case of Mexico, we will continue promoting. In that sense, I'm happy to say all conditions were met in Mexico to develop such a policy. But of course, we had to have a certain base in order for this to be effective.
Very much, Omar. I think it's a really interesting example of how a country, indeed, at one hand, is facing additional challenges because of certain expectations, but at the same time, this is really providing opportunities to make improvements across the board through a number of specific initiatives. And where you highlight the importance also of social dialogue and engagement with the social partners, both employers and the workers, in getting them on board on these improvements. And I must say, I'm very happy to see on this panel that indeed we have a very good representation of the employers and of the workers to also give their view on this very important topic of occupational safety and health in global supply chains. And I would like to turn now to Matthias Storns, as I said, the Deputy Director General of the International Organization of Employers, which is, of course, the largest employers organization of the world, with employers organizations as members from around the world. So Matthias, you know, we've heard already about what governments in a way are doing. And of course, it would be very important to see how the IOE, together with employers' organizations, work with them on this really important topic of occupational safety and health, and how this also global supply chains can create opportunities to improve the observance of safety and health standards. So what do you see really as the role of employers' organizations to also help member companies in scaling up their efforts and ensuring better occupational safety and health in their operations?
Thank you, Gita, and greetings from sunny Geneva. I'm indeed very privileged because for me it is 12 o'clock or 12:15 lunchtime, so I'm well awake and happy to engage in this panel. First of all, let us be clear that the UN Guiding Principles clearly demand from multinational companies, from all companies actually, from all companies, to seek to mitigate and address human rights challenges that they are linked to through their products, through their services, or through their business partners, through the supply chain, right? And companies are very engaged in this. They are doing OSH audits, they're doing social audits, they have hotlines when there are problems for employees in the supply chain, they engage in remedy, and City Show will speak to us in a minute, you know, what Nike is doing on this one. And with their activities, they really can start to trigger change on the ground, right? bringing exporters on track can have an important role actually to have a broader impact. But this broader impact will not come alone, right? This broader impact will be there if you have multipliers who are then taking this initiative and making sure it is a whole society, a whole economy approach. What does it mean? It means that we really need to start engaging in capacity building of all companies, not only the exporters. We need to strengthen labor inspection, which is of critical importance. We need to raise awareness. We need to come to a OSH culture, which is not reacting to whatever incidents it is, but which is proactively looking what are the risks and how we can address these risks. And employer federation plays an important role. They play an important role because they're often engaged in policy making, right? In national economic councils or national social councils. They have a huge outreach to the local economy, right? Because the SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises, they are members. So they can reach these enterprises, they can raise awareness there, they can build capacity there, and they can organize collective action, bringing them together actually, and to address underlying causes. And that is what you really have to tackle, because then we create spillover effects from exporters to the local economy. And that is of crucial importance, because a multinational company will always only reach first tier, second tier, but then it stops. If you want to go down to the fourth, fifth tiers, you need basically to address the whole economy. And that you only be able if you bring all actors on board. Governments, of course, they play an important role when it is about labor inspection, focusing on issues like corruption, which is undermining in too many countries, actually, the effectiveness of labor inspection. And then, of course, also the federations who bring the employers to the table. There's one other aspect, and I'm sure my colleague Len and also Papa will speak to that. The importance of social dialogue. The importance to address, of course, OSH challenges together with trade unions, but to go even beyond that, right? To make economies more resilient, to make them more productive. Because if you're a company which is always on the margin of going bankrupt, if you have no leverage actually in investing in new technology, if you have no money to investing in safer workplaces, you know, we will not make great progress. So it's so important to have a social dialogue which is looking at all these issues. It's looking at OSH for sure, but it is also looking on issues linked to, for instance, productivity and competitiveness. And then the main point which we all need to be on board is really informality, which is the root causes for so many OSH incidences, right? It is in the informal economy where the OSH risks are the highest, by far the highest. And if we don't get that under control, we will make never progress on this issue. And again, there's a huge role for social partners, for employers and for trade unions. Rule in order to organize them and to help companies to formalize, right? Through many ways, right? Help them to register, help them to address causes why they are not registering, right? But also with social partners, with the trade union to improve the framework conditions. So it is much more attractive actually to register a company, because then you have access to financial means, then you have then you have access to skills development and so on and so forth. So there are huge opportunities for trade unions and employers to join together to improve the framework conditions. And we really have to grab that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Matthias. I think you raised a lot of different topics that, of course, are all linked and clearly also highlight the need for collective action and create the spillover effects, the role of social dialogue, the importance of addressing informality. We know in the ILO, of course, that is something that we are actively working on the formalization aspect, capacity building, labor inspection. I mean, you've mentioned many different topics that all of the panelists, I'm sure, will be also looking at in their own ways of working on occupational safety and health in global supply chains. You mentioned specifically, of course, what the opportunities and limitations are also of multinational enterprises in working with the different tiers. So I would like now to turn to Siti Choke. Precisely, you are, of course, the largest sport brand in the world with multiple suppliers around the world. And we all know that Nike started on a whole journey of making improvements on working conditions, including occupational safety and health, since the past 25 years. So it really would be interesting for us to learn, you know, how really a large company like Nike is moving on this journey, and what are the opportunities for bringing about change, but also what are some of the remaining challenges, and what are your expectations also from government, from the social partners, employers organizations, and so on. So the floor is yours.
I'll echo what the other panelists have said. Geeta, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. So our 30-year, 25-year journey, you know, I can probably characterize that in 4 different stages, and we continue to do many of the activities as we've learned and improved. But I think what I wanted to do was to focus on, you know, stage 3 and 4. So the 4 stages of our journey. The first one, Matthijs talked a little bit about this. It's risk management and investigation. So after we you know, managed our risks and investigated some of the problems, then we moved to recognition and monitoring. Stage 3. Partnerships and transparency, and that's what I wanted to talk a lot about here is, you know, partnerships, as well as stage 4, where we're currently, you know, developing some innovation to scale initiatives, and we feel that these type of initiatives create disruptive change that can make, you know, significant improvements in occupational health and safety. So I'll start with stage 1 and 2. Back in the early 90s, I think many of us know Nike's history, but we were actively investigating and defining the labor, health, and safety issues in our supply chain. And quite frankly, you know, we were reacting, as Matthijs has said earlier, we were reacting and managing those risks. You know, not being as proactive as we would have liked in the early days. You know, at the time, we also acknowledged that, you know, through our investigations that there were problems. And once we identified what those problems were, we developed our code of conduct and our co-leadership standards. Now, Nike wasn't the first company to develop a code of conduct. We kind of give that honor to Levi Strauss, but we did develop, you know, this code for our suppliers and our value chain. And what that code of conduct did was it created the foundation for our initial monitoring programs. Now, these monitoring programs, you know, even though they're one of our initial steps, we still continue those programs today. Now, moving to stage 3, partnerships and transparency, we realized fairly quickly that monitoring alone did not make those systemic changes or sustained improvements in our factory partners. So as a result, we started stage 3 of our journey, which, you know, we started to develop partnerships and provide a greater transparency into our supply chain practices. And with the hope that the partnerships and the transparency would drive more systemic changes and improvements in OSH. So a couple of examples of partnerships that we've joined, and I'll talk about this more later, but the first partnership was the Apparel Industry Partnership, and this organization later became the Fair Labor Association. We also endorsed the UN Global Compact Initiative for Responsible International Business Practice, and later, within stage 3, we supported an ILO and IFC initiative. That's the Better Work program. So these 3 partnerships, as well as others, we still value those partnerships and continue to engage with these organizations today. From a transparency perspective, again, transparency, trying to drive more systemic improvements and hold ourselves accountable to some of the commitments that we made. You know, we made public our monitoring results in the early 2000s. We also became became the first industry brand to disclose a list of our finished goods suppliers. So again, with these two transparency initiatives, we're hoping that we hold ourselves accountable, as well as other organizations who are able to see where we operate hold us accountable to our standards as well. Lastly, what I wanted to talk about now is stage 4, and we're currently in stage 4. We still are implementing what we've learned in stage 1, 2, and 3. But we feel that stage 4, where we talk about broader collective action and what that means to us. So we feel strongly that broader collective action with with Vision Zero Fund, with the members of this panel, it's a critical enabler of creating disruptive change. And we look forward to working with all the panelists here to develop some new innovation to scale initiatives to help us, improve our extended supply chain, including tier 2 suppliers. So there are several challenges within tier 2 that we feel, collective action is going to be that critical enabler. So thank you, Greta.
Yes, thanks a lot, Chok, for sharing that experience of a multinational enterprise, as I said, with, of course, suppliers from around the world going through this journey. And I picked up a few times you were mentioning, bring about systemic change, and how can this be brought about, and the importance of working together with the other actors in this regard. And I will now turn to the workers' representatives on this panel. And especially, first, I would like to turn to Papakwasi Dankwa of the ITUC. The ITUC, of course, has been working for a very long time on improving occupational safety and health for workers, including in global supply chains, and improving working conditions in general in global supply chains. And so very much focusing on what is needed, of course, to bring about a better protection of occupational safety and health and improving working conditions. And last year, the ITUC specifically published a report advocating for the state duty to protect, to use the different pillars of the guiding principles on business and human rights that Matthias already also mentioned. So looking at what states should be doing, including in the area of stronger legislation, to better protect human rights in global supply chains. So can you explain what you are expecting states to do more in taking up their responsibility to protect human rights and protect occupational safety and health in global supply chains? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all my colleagues for the presentations. The ITUC has indeed been calling for a new social contract. And this year, the social contract demand is for jobs, including climate-friendly jobs, a floor of rights for all workers, social protection, inclusion, and equality. And regarding rights, we have called for a floor of labor protections serving as a guarantor of labor rights in line with the ILO Centenary Declaration, covering fundamental labor rights, including occupational health and safety, living wages, minimum working time for all workers. And this is the same case we are making in the position paper on mandatory human rights due diligence in global supply chains, especially the initiative at the national level through legislation. We are saying that the global supply chains, which serves to produce and trade in cheap products for consumers, benefit from hidden costs borne by the hidden workers in all sectors and tiers of the supply chains. With infamous examples like Rana Plaza and the recent Brumadinho tragedy in Brazil, workers suffer anti-union discrimination and occupational injuries and deaths on a daily basis. You have children, young people, and women suffering particularly from this business model of hidden workers in supply chains. Regrettably, on 9th February this year, 28 garment workers were reported killed in a factory located in the basement of a residential villa in Tangier, Morocco. This is abhorrent. Such factories are used to beat the competition of supply in global supply chains. Corporate actors cannot enjoy immunity from the application of international labor standards and human rights. Companies, including MNEs, must be held accountable through mandatory human rights due diligence at the national level. Standards and measures for prevention, mitigation, accountability, transparency, monitoring and sanctions, participation and social dialogue, liability and remedy, covering all workers and all businesses must be at the heart of this mandatory human rights due diligence legislation. And this is foundational to achieving zero severe and fatal work-related accidents, injuries, and deaths in global supply chains. A recent EU study showed that voluntary initiatives alone does not work. It showed that 70% of businesses who responded called for or agreed to regulation as necessary. So this is why national, regional, and international mandatory human rights due diligence in supply chains is necessary. And this is what the ITUC is calling for at the national level as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Papa. That's a very clear message on what you are expecting from governments to do at different levels. So I do want to go back also to the role of trade unions and workers' organizations actually in improving occupational safety and health in operations of enterprises. And I would like to ask Glenn, of course, from Industrial, you know, of course, the state has to do a lot, but there's also a role for trade unions to play in improvement plans at the enterprise level. So how do you see the role of trade unions in these OSH improvement plans and also in due diligence processes, as they were mentioned previously by your colleague? And what are some of the current barriers actually for trade unions to be a full partner in these processes? Glenn, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Gita, for the opportunity, and thanks to the Vision Zero Fund for the invitation, and thanks to my fellow panelists. Industrial Global Union represents 50 million workers across 140 countries in the mining, energy, and manufacturing sector. This representation, therefore, gives Industrial Global Union a global supply chain footprint. Just briefly, in a follow-up to Papa, regarding the duty of the state to protect, we believe that in tandem with the duty of the state to protect, we consider that the employer's duty of care to their employees as a critical measure vital for better occupational and safety outcomes. This means that employers right across the supply chain must take all necessary steps that are reasonably practicable to ensure the occupational health and safety of their employees. As regards the role of trade unions, and maybe before I go to the role of trade unions, there's another important, I think, factor to consider, and this is the vital role of public procurement in the due diligence conversation, to the extent that occupational health and safety best practice is elevated in the procurement consideration process. As regards the role of trade unions in occupational health and safety improvement plans, in the first instance, research has shown that trade unions save lives, what is commonly called the union safety effect. The union safety effect is achieved through, amongst other things, an emphasis on a rights-based approach to occupational health and safety. This involves the right to know about hazards and be trained in how to do the work safely, the right to refuse or shut down unsafe work, and the right to fully participate wall-to-wall in the design and implementation of workplace health and safety policies, programs, and procedures. An example of the safety effect has been notable in the mining industry and also in the Bangladesh Accord following the Rana Plaza tragedy. Regarding due diligence process, the OECD guidance, for instance, directs enterprises to engage with trade unions and to facilitate worker involvement in the design and implementation of due diligence processes. Trade unions also routinely engage with the OECD due diligence access to remedy mechanisms through national contact points in different countries to raise, amongst other issues of occupational health and safety, as we did together with BWI in the Samako tailings dam collapse. As regards barriers, uppermost in the factors that constitute barriers in this process is what Papi called as the accountability gap found across the global supply chain, particularly at the bottom of the global supply chains, broadly constituted in low and middle income countries that produce for developed countries in a race to the bottom phenomenon. The accountability gap derives from the absence of legally binding or mandatory compliance requirements, and we hope that the traction in Europe for mandatory due diligence legislation will significantly address this accountability gap. Now throw into the barrier mix the fact that occupational health and safety is not amongst the ILO's fundamental principles and rights at work. You begin to appreciate the challenges across the global supply chain in respect of occupational health and safety. That would be our perspective and contribution. Thanks, Ajita.
Yes, thank you very much, Glenn, for highlighting these challenges in relation also to engagement of trade unions in many of the processes and improvement on occupational safety and health, but also what the opportunities are and what you are expecting from governments and also from enterprises. So have finished now the first round of questions with the different speakers, where they've been focusing on what they have been doing themselves in addressing occupational safety and health in their in supply chains, but of course in business operations, and focusing on what they have been doing, what their role is, what responsibilities are. But of course, collective action and working together to address some of the systemic challenges is something that has been mentioned already by all of the panelists as well. And so, you know, in order to come to this collective action, so what is really needed by the different actors to come together and address some of these systemic challenges in a systemic way, so that we jointly move forward in improving occupational safety and health. So this is the same question to all of the panelists, and I will just take the same sequencing of speakers as in the first round to make things easy. So I will go back to Antonio. So you have the floor on what is needed, what are the opportunities for collective action.
Thank you, Gita. Thank you again. And of course, I would like to be quite clear and synthetic on this point, because there is it's clear, and we all share the need to involve all the actors in the field to make sure that our policies can be effective. So from the point of view of the European Commission, of course, the first point is cooperating with other international entities and institutions to make it a reality. First of all, I would like to mention our host today, and saying that we are, as the European Commission, are very much committed to be engaged with the ILO in the implementation and follow-up of the 2019 Centenary Declaration for the Future of Work, in particular as regards the integration of the right to safe and healthy working condition into the ILO framework of fundamental principles and rights at work. It's something which the ILO is working on, and of course the Commission is very much and actively involved in promoting this approach. We fully support it. A second important aspect is the cooperation at a multilateral level within international institutional frameworks, and I would like, of course, to to mention, first of all, once again, to mention what we are for the time being we are considering is the G7 Vision Zero Fund. Of course, this is an important priority and an area framework in which the European Commission will continue to be very, very active. And of course, in complementary and also I would say in relation to this, the G20 Safer Workplaces initiative and other initiatives on which the European Commission has been for years now very active, for instance, just to mention one important thing is the Bangladesh Sustainability Compact. I think that, and this is something that I have already mentioned, but it's important to stress once again, ensuring all standards also means to make sure that they are an integral part of our trade agreements. As part, of course, in a broader context of the respect of social rights, but of course, it's important for us that all future EU trade agreements will include effective also monitoring and enforcement mechanisms for being sure that these provisions are really and effectively implemented in the field. I would like to mention, to conclude the second round, the participation of the Commission to the ILO-led Global Coalition for Safety and Health at Work, which is also a very important initiative. And I think we are coming back to the first thing I was mentioning, to the multilateral approach, to the capacity of creating networking. And in this case, this initiative brings together, as you may know, different actors on topical issues of international policy. And I think, and I'm sure that the Commission will continue to be very active in this framework. Thank you, Ginta.
Thank you, Antonio. Now turning to Omar. You already mentioned in your first intervention the importance of social dialogue, bringing different partners on board to bring about the change. So it's up to you now for the floor.
Thank you, Gita. Of course, from a government point of view, we always try or seek to create public value. And in particular, how we can make the best out of the context to bring together all stakeholders to improve working conditions. As I mentioned in my previous intervention, international treaties in the case of Mexico were very important to recognize what was changing, to try to push systemic change. But in order to make the best out of our context, we first need to understand how supply chains work. For example, in Mexico, the ILO's office recently led a study on the coffee value chain, which developed a very specific methodology to identify the drivers and constraints relating to the improvement of the value chain and to propose possible interventions to address these specific constraints. So in Mexico, we have a very diverse private sector. We have high-tech manufacturing supply chains and also an increasingly exporting agricultural primary sector. And we have to understand those differences and similarities between different sectors. I believe through a thorough understanding of how different supply chain works is crucial to develop specific policies to improve occupational safety and health, and of course, in general, working conditions. Even if systemic actions across different sectors is the ultimate goal, I think the basis should be understanding how different supply chains work. Because as I just mentioned, like we have sometimes like very high-tech manufacturing sectors which are led by many times corporate policies regarding occupational health and safety. And then we have, on the other hand, like very incipient growing sectors which do not have such policies. So a thorough understanding of how different supply chains work, I think it's very important.
Thank you very much, Omar. Really highlighting this that in a way there is no one solution to addressing these systemic difficulties. So I think that is something really, really important to look at, that there is not one only solution to address the different situations and challenges on occupational safety and health in supply chains. Matthias, you already mentioned in your first intervention the need for collective action. So can you elaborate a bit further on this?
Thank you so much, and thank you also to give a focus to collective action in this forum, because that is of critical importance, and it was actually quite a lot of colleagues who spoke about the importance about that. And also let me refer and make the link there to mandatory due diligence. Don't worry, I don't want to open the debate on mandatory due diligence. That's not my point. But my point is, if you want to achieve change on the ground, if you want to achieve change in the informal economy, if you want to achieve change in the purely domestic economy, mandatory due diligence is completely helpless, right? It will not do any good for that. Not bad, but nothing good for that. We have to be clear about that. So it is important, if you want to achieve change, if you want to improve the safety of the entire workforce, you need to take a different approach. And that is indeed at national levels through collective action. The ILO has an important role to play. You have a huge convening power, bringing together governments, employers, trade unions, companies, right? And the beauty of the Vision Zero Fund is that it really plays it very well. I really must congratulate to the Vision Zero Fund that it includes everyone, right? It really reaches actively out to the social partners, it reaches out to companies, and governments are also on the table. So that is really the big strength, and that is also to the companies who are now visiting and looking at this panel to say, if you want to engage in collective action, the Vision Zero Fund is actually a good approach to do that. We need to strengthen national ownership. Too much and too often we have this top-down approach, right? Where somewhere in a headquarter or in the capital in the West or in Japan or wherever, a strategy is developed, and then it is believed we just can roll that out in, you know, the global south or wherever the supply chain is. It is not working like that. We need to have national ownership when we want to change the culture in a nation. And again, I would like to congratulate the Vision Zero Fund, because it really takes a very local approach, right? Engaging at local level with the constituents. And the fact that we had this regional meeting yesterday during this conference actually prove and shows how much the Vision Zero Fund takes this local approach. I think we need a much better engagement between the different ILO programs and projects, right? We have this one ILO approach in Ethiopia, which basically means that the project on social dialogue is closely engaging with the project of the ILO on OSH, closely engaging with the project on labor inspection. So there we really create the synergies, right, to make big impact. And these we need to do much more than we did in the past. And we heard already from City Shock, right? They engage in better work, right? Then there's the SCORE project and so many other projects which we really need to make sure we're connecting the dots on all these activities. And finally, if we want to be impactful, we need to make sure that the activities are always needs-driven, not donor-driven, right? It's not enough if a donor comes and says, we want to engage in this supply chain, in this country, and here's the money. Because it might be not the needs of the local constituents. It might be not the needs of the companies to engage, right? So it is a first step always needs to be, what are the needs? And for that, it needs consultation with the social partners, with the companies, and based on that, the project can be then developed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. You raised quite a number of good points in relation to collective action. And City Choke, we already heard from you as well the importance of collective action, and that's also where you are focusing on in going further. So can you also share with us what your vision is on collective action?
Sure, Gita, thank you very much again for the floor. I think just listening to the other panelists, one thing is pretty clear in my mind is we all have the same goal. And that goal is to improve working conditions in the factories and also to prevent accidents, right, and injuries and serious and fatalities for that matter. So I think that's something, you know, all of us here can agree on. You know, How we do it, we've heard about the different mechanisms, whether it's legislation, enforcement, social dialogue, engagement with workers and worker representatives and worker organizations. They're all different mechanisms that we're experts at. And I can talk about Nike as a single brand. Alone, we can make only incremental improvements by ourselves. However, we found that through collaboration, with a broader, diverse group of organizations, we can create not just incremental change and improvements, but what we call disruptive change. And that disruptive change helps improve workplace conditions in our supply chain at a much faster pace. So, that collaboration has helped us accelerate some of those improvements, and we feel strongly about that. So I wanted to give a couple of examples of, of projects that we've participated in and the benefits of collective action. I believe that, continue to develop shop floor skills and engaging workers to participate in health and safety activities should be a point of emphasis of collective action. As an example, we partner with IOSH and the Fair Labor Association to develop a, what I consider a really fantastic train the trainer program. I think there was a question in the chat box about, what's the role of, professional organizations like IOSH. And this is an example of one of those where, we can bring them together with multi-stakeholder organizations like the FLA, with Nike, and develop these programs. So the Train the Trainer program, what was really unique and I think a value added for us is that, the people who participated in this were line workers. And what we were able to do through this collaboration is to train them to facilitate health and safety discussions with their peers. We've found that this program has been highly effective. And to date, we've trained more than 5,000 line workers on how to be facilitators. And we think that it's an important program that we're going to continue to implement and scale. So another one, and Matthias mentioned this, I mentioned it earlier, another collective action that we find value is our partnership with ILO's Better Work program. These are country level programs. And the thing that we love about those programs is that, they strive to go well beyond compliance, well beyond monitoring. And they place a really high priority on developing capabilities, specifically leadership capabilities, and also health and safety management systems. Again, we need to go beyond just monitoring because those things don't make systemic change. And we truly believe that if we develop leaders who can engage with and value their workers in their factories, they're going to be rewarded with, very leading health and safety performance. So those are some examples of, collective action that, we've taken and we've seen, some dramatic effects, and definitely would like to broaden the collective action through the Vision Zero Fund and many other members of this panel. Thank you, Gita.
Thank you very much, Choke, and I really liked what you were saying. We all have the same goal, which is really the prevention of accidents and creating this preventative culture of occupational safety and health. I think that is probably the most important takeaway and commitment from all of the panelists here. We are all trying to address the same, we all have the same goal and trying to address the same challenges, but there are different mechanisms in actually getting there. And then coming together through collective action, each from our own side in moving forward is a very important message, I think, taking away. I do want to give the floor to Papa and Glenn as well, on the whole collective action, what is needed. So what is your view on that? Papa, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And of course, I will disagree with Matthias about his comment on the role of mandatory human rights due diligence. Taking steps to prevent human rights violations, including OSH through risk assessments, and so on in supply chains at the national level cannot be irrelevant. But let me go to the question on collective action. We must look at workers' conditions as a whole. It is actually a good indicator of whether there's a culture in a corporate environment or labor inspectorate for respecting OSH. So monitoring and inspections must look at all conditions of service, including freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining, because workers must be empowered through freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining to ensure OSH compliance. We must respect and promote the role of trade unions and workers as key internal stakeholders in the company and as key members also of the community. So we must work together here. We must respect each other and respect the role each other plays in ensuring and preventing injuries at the workplace.
Thank you very much, Papa, for this. Glenn, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I'll follow in the footsteps of some of what my colleagues have said, emphasizing particular the critical role of the ILO, and that has been underlined in this regard around collaboration and collective action. And this role is, observed even at the level of bilaterals between employers and global unions in the area of global framework agreements, to the extent that they should begin to speak very, strongly around occupational health and safety. And at the national level, we think that, safety reps play a very critical, important role, at the site level. And support from employers as well as trade unions is very critical, and of course, last but not least is what Papi mentioned about the role of voluntary initiatives, which have come for heavy criticism even from within industrial. However, there is something to be said about reporting standards, including the UN Global Compact, where collaboration and collective action can happen there. And despite what Matthias may say, in the absence of globally binding mechanisms, voluntary standards provide a platform for collaboration and collective action if properly conceived. And strict criteria of transparency and credibility, such as multi-stakeholder governance and third-party independent audits. And the health and safety, occupational health and safety, plays a big part of of that standard conversation. I'd like to mention, for instance, the Responsible Mining and Assurance Initiative, EMA, and the Responsible Mining Index. And these are the two critical voluntary reporting standards that we think provide opportunities for collaboration and collective action. That would be our contribution.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Again, many different elements that have been put forward by the different panelists, and also concrete examples of collective action. So we are now going to the Q&A part of the discussion, and I have received so far two specific questions. The first one is specifically addressed to the workers, participants on the panel, and you've already touched upon this question in your intervention. But the question is really, what place is given to workers and workers' representatives in the implementation of better working conditions? It is something you've touched upon, but there is an additional question on this. So, Papa, you want to take this one, or Glenn? Please go ahead.
Let me say quickly, and then Glenn, because he perhaps has more concrete examples. But the foundation for workers' participation is the recognition of their right to collective bargaining and their right to join a union, because that is the enabling right that empowers them to participate in all the OSH committees at the workplace, to articulate and to monitor what is happening. So let me hand over to Glenn, because he may have more practical examples here.
Thank you, Papa. Glenn, please go ahead.
I think the ILO's various, safety standards and conventions recommendation place a premium on the role of worker representatives. And, to the extent, back to my question, that they are supported, by trade unions and by employers at the enterprise level. Our experience is that they are most often isolated, to the extent that they become, on the one hand, the eyes and ears, of management, basically become the health and safety police, and when they should actually be looking after the interests of workers, and we found that they are very isolated, so they are at the forefront, basically, in the end, and that role is not recognized in our view, that they take, if you like, the pressure from both sides, and on the one hand, and it ties in with the question around the role of health professionals, and which goes to the issues of training and capacity building. But then the question is, what type of training and capacity building is brought to bear on the occupational health and safety representatives? And this is where I think a balance, in terms of what the trade union provides and what the employer provides, does not end up confusing, as it were, the worker health and safety representative at the enterprise level.
Thank you, Glenn. This is a really important point that you are making about workers and the OSH agents within the enterprise and their role in training, although not to be confused then with training given by management. And actually, our next question that we receive is also about the role of national OSH professional associations in promoting safety and health in global supply chains. So this is a question we received via the Q&A box for all of the participants. So I think Chok, Matthias, Glenn, maybe this is a question you can also answer. So Chok, please go ahead.
Yeah, so, I mentioned earlier one of the programs that IOSH, which is a, professional or international professional organization, and, the roles that they've taken in developing, very specific programs, shop floor programs that develop capability. So, I think in general, the role of these professional organizations is to help develop those capabilities, not only at the safety professional level, but also at the worker level, right? And I think I fully agree with what Glenn and Papa have said around, we need to better engage workers. We need to better train them. We need to be able to give them the right skills and capabilities to monitor, health and safety at the floor level. We've got great strategies and deployment of those strategies, but really where the rubber hits the road and where there's a, an effect is at the ground level, at the floor level. And consultants can help us build the capabilities at the floor level. They can help us build capabilities at the management and leadership level. So I think that's the primary role of these organizations, is to help us as brands develop that, because we're not present in the factories 24/7. But we do try to, implement strategies to develop these capabilities. But with the help of consultants and of professional associations, I think that capability development can happen a lot faster.
Thank you very much, Chok. Matthias, you want to go next in response to this question?
Sure. I mean, as Chok has said, they can play an important role in order to bring in expertise. There is no question about it. But there is also, of course, no question that they do not replace good labor inspection. They do not replace social dialogue, and they don't replace, the rule of law. So there is an important role for them, for sure, in order to build capacity. But we must make sure that, what is the role of every actor, and that, we are clear on that. And this, of course, association cannot replace the rule of any of the other actors. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Floor is yours.
I think, like everybody else, there is, I mean, an important role for them to play, and we've seen that, you know, and I think also, you know, to the extent that they are independent, so to speak, you know, to the extent that they are impartial, you know, to the extent that they build capacity across the board, you know, for workers and for management, you know. You know, normally, and it depends on how they are being introduced, you know, at the factory floor, to the extent that they are seen as an agency for management, becomes an issue for workers, you know, and there are issues of, I think, which we have to deal with, issues of trust, you know, in the workplace. And you know, to the extent that, for instance, if a union could bring in a professional or health and safety provider, you know, whether management would be able to give support to that and bring in that skill to upscale, you know, your worker health and safety representatives. I think it is important that they are seen not as part of the apparatus of management, but rather as independent, impartial, you know, as, you know, building capacity and training in the various fields of occupational health and safety.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for this response. And it brings us to actually a next question that we have received via the Q&A box, which is really about training and training the trainers. And this is a question specifically addressed to Choke, because you mentioned your programs on Train the Trainer initiative. And then another question specifically addressed to you is, you know, you used a lot the terminology disruptive change. So what do you really mean by disruptive change?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I'll address the disruptive change first. So when we say disruptive change, what I really mean is developing initiatives, innovation to scale initiatives, right? So, you know, innovation to scale means somebody has an idea. So as a group, you know, as a collective, we have an idea. How do we take that idea, develop it, and pilot it? And then once we've piloted it, how do we scale that, you know, more broadly to our constituents and our stakeholders? So that's what I mean about disruptive change is, you know, that process of taking a new idea and scaling it to make change is how we kind of describe disruptive change. So I hope that's a little bit helpful. Now, the other question on Train the Trainer. So this was an initiative that was developed jointly by the Fair Labor Association and the ILO, specifically for the apparel and footwear industry. So Nike wasn't the only participant. There were other FLA members that also participated in this Train the Trainer initiative. But basically what it was is the ILO and the FLA, they trained what we call a master trainer. So that master trainer could be, you know, a member of Better Work. It could be a brand member. It could be, you know, a person within a country government. And those are the different types of people that have gone through this master trainer initiative. And those master trainers were tasked to cascade their skills and capabilities to what we call facilitators. And those facilitators are the trained trainers, or those trainers that train their peers. So that cascading model had very detailed instructions on how to facilitate. So the capability that we're developing wasn't necessarily a technical capability around occupational health and safety. It was a capability of how do you facilitate? How do you engage other workers? How do you talk to them about health and safety issues? And the topic that we used was fire safety, because I think many many of the workers are aware of the topic and the issue. And we use that as the topic to initially train their peers. And once they got comfortable training on a topic that they were familiar with, we were able to introduce additional topics so that they can train their peers on. So it's basically just a cascading model, but I don't want to kind of sell it short because it's not, that simple. There's a lot of details in terms of how do you train people to be, effective facilitators. And that program is what made this one a little bit special, is that it really focused on developing that capability.
Thank you very much, Chok, for elaborating on these two. I mean, the concept of disruptive change, first of all, and then the whole train the trainer and the cascading system down the line. We received another question specifically for Omar and Antonio, which is going back to the role of government. So how can we improve government supervision and labor inspection in a country? What is needed? What are the challenges or what are the barriers for effective labor inspection? Omar, you want to go first?
Sure, thank you, Gita. So of course, first I would like to say that many times we tend to think of inspection and fiscalization as the sole means to improve working conditions. When it comes down to occupational health and safety and health, in many countries, what happens is that we have a different array, a large array of norms, which, of course, when private sector tries to implement, many times they don't even know where to start. So even if we were to have a high number of inspectors, thinking that it is only through fiscalization that we're going to reach a good level of occupational safety and health standard, I think it's mistaken. So in that sense, what we've done in Mexico, for example, is coming up with a program of management systems of occupational health and safety, in which labor inspectors work not only as inspectors in the strict sense of the word, but they also assist workplaces to improve their conditions. This is, of course, tied with tax benefits, and we've proven that many times these kind of systems work even better than labor inspectors. So, for example, we've seen a 60% decrease in the number of accidents in companies that are enrolled in this program, in opposition to the rest of the companies which are being inspected regularly. So I think it kind of shows which ways exist, and that not only through traditional inspection we can increase safety levels.
Thank you very much, Omar. This is really interesting how inspection indeed is combined with improvement plans and actually providing support through different means to make improvements at the corporate level. And of course, I mean, combining with a number of elements that Matthias already highlighted as well, you know, as part of the corporate responsibility to respect human rights and improvement plans as part of due diligence. This is also where public and private in a way comes together. So Antonio, is this also something that the European Commission is working on this combination of, at the one hand, inspection, strengthening labor inspection, but at the other hand, combining it with opportunities for improvement and accompanying companies on these improvement plans?
Yes, thank you, Gita. I would like to say this should not be considered or read as a sort of defensive attitude, but to make things clear, the European Union and the Commission have a limited control on the way member states actually implement their enforcement policies. There is no competences in the treaty for that. On the other hand, we must say that we have a very important and I would say successful tradition of the activity of SLIC, which is the Senior Labor Inspector Committee, is a consultative body within the Commission. And this consultative body, this committee was set up in 1994, I think. So as a long tradition already, and it works a lot on the aspects of possible coordination and a change of experience between national inspections. One thing must be said, and I would come back to what Omar was just said. Of course, within the European Union, there are different cultures and traditions in terms of the way, the approach to inspection. I would say that there is, just to be very, 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 to simplify a lot, but just to simplify a lot, there is a tradition from the Nordic countries where the inspection are very much supported by social dialogue, for instance. And it is, in my view, it's a quite interesting and effective way to create synergies. There are, in the southern part of Europe, the tradition is more linked to let's say, a legal view of the inspection as control, as check on the spot, and but I mean, both things can be effective. It depends, of course, on the resources you are able to invest on that, and this is also a very important point. We are very much we are far away from the ideal situation which the ILO promoted with its standards, but this is reality, and we have to live with that. But and there are also, in this case, relatively great differences in the way things are in the different member states. But it's, for the time being, what we can say on that.
Thank you, Antonio. This indeed talking about the different cultures and how different mechanisms can come together to move towards this common goal that already was highlighted by a number of the panelists in terms of really prevent accidents and have a much better culture of occupational safety and health in business operations is something that clearly came out from this session. We've come to the end of the session, and we have a few minutes left. So I will give all of you the opportunity for your final intervention, very short, 1 minute. And I will start this time, ending or starting with those that had started our panel discussion last. So I will go to Glenn first. Your 1 minute final statement, Glenn.
Yeah, and I think it's along what you just said, how do we craft a shared occupational health and safety culture? I think that is the ultimate, challenge and a vision, and the role of the Vision Zero Fund, is very critical. Cannot be overstated. There is a lot more that unites us than divides us on the question of occupational health and safety. And I think we must focus on, as a strength, on the things that basically unite us, without shying away from addressing those things that actually, present, a challenge to either of the, of the social partners. So industry all is ready and willing to put its weight, behind, the initiative, and yeah.
Thank you, Glenn. Papa?
Yes, so just following from Glenn, the objective is clear for zero accidents at the workplace, and we must, do that through realizing that each of us in the space, in the standard space and regulatory space on OSH have a mandate and a role to play in achieving that vision, and respect each other's role and recognize each other's role in doing that. I think that will be a good way to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Papa. Matthias?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really would like to call on everyone to make the Vision Zero Fund a success. The Vision Zero Fund takes the right approach by organizing collective action to have a local approach, and now we really make it work. So I really would encourage everyone who is on this conference, on this webinar, to consider to join the Vision Zero Fund, to engage in the Vision Zero Fund. It's the right way to address the OSH risk which we see in so many countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Choke?
Yeah, thanks again, Gita. What I wanted to say here to kind of end up is, in less than a month, actually, it's scheduled for March 10th. Nike's going to publish our 2021 impact report. And in that impact report, we're going to make our first ever public commitment to building world-class healthy and safe workplaces in our supply chain. So quite frankly, it's a very, very aggressive target. And the reason why I mention it is we don't think that we'll be able to achieve this commitment without strategic partnerships and collective action. So, the Vision Zero Fund in particular, developing a much stronger and more intimate relationship with a convening organization like the Vision Zero Fund, developing stronger partnerships with professional organizations like IOSH, and others on this call as well. It's going to be very critical in achieving our commitments. And we truly believe that collectively, together, we can develop those innovation to scale solutions that I talked about earlier. We can create disruptive change. We can make transformational change and improvements in our workplace. And we do that through collective action.
Thank you, Chok, for this. We look forward to seeing the report when it comes out in June. Omar? Sorry, the floor is yours, Omar. You have to unmute.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just saying that I'm very glad I've been invited to this panel. It's been truly a pleasure to listen to my fellow panelists. And for me, of course, the key message has been the call for a systemic change in order to improve working conditions across the globe. Chok just mentioned governments, employers, and workers share a common goal, which is, of course, to improve working conditions. And I believe such change can only come if all stakeholders are involved. Social dialogue is, of course, the underlying condition to achieve decent work for everyone, irrespective of the country, the supply chain, or the product. As Papa mentioned, of course, working conditions must be assessed as a whole with a cross-sectional view on decent work. And this is why in Mexico, for example, the most recent labor reforms are focused in strengthening collective action and collective bargaining. Of course, also in the context of Mexico, context can help and should be capitalized by governments when possible, but social dialogue and diligent participation by stakeholders linked through real and transparent social dialogue are the precondition to continue improving decent work. And finally, I think initiatives as the Vision Zero Fund are crucial to jointly advancing the understanding of how supply chains work and how can we achieve zero injuries and zero diseases. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Omar. So turning to our last panelist, Antonio, for your final words.
Yes, thank you, Greta. I would like just to remind about two things, quite recent things. First of all, the communication of the European Commission on a strong social Europe for just transitions, which was adopted last year. And it is clear what is included in this document is that the European Union, the European Commission considers important that OSH would be regarded as an integral element of a future policy in terms of transformation at company level and economy as a whole. Also in view of the green and digital transitions and the global dimension of today's businesses and trade. With that in mind, I would like to conclude just by mentioning the fact that we are working currently on a new strategic framework on health and safety, which should be adopted later this year, probably at the end of the second quarter of 2020. And I can tell you that the external action in the area of OSH will be for certain a main area of initiatives for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonio. It is, we've come to the end of this session, and I really would like to thank all of the panelists for this very stimulating discussion. We've touched upon many, many different issues, many different roles and responsibilities, but especially the need for collective action to bring about systemic change. Maybe we need to go to disruptive change to get to systemic change. So I think we had a really, really good discussion. And I also would like to thank the panelists actually for making my life as the moderator really easy, because we were in time now finishing this session. So I'm glad the organizers will be happy with my role as a moderator as well. And I think the discussion we had is really the perfect transition to the closing session of the Vision Zero Fund high-level forum. So I invite all of you to go to that final plenary session, the closing session of this really important high-level forum. I would like to thank all of you, including all of the participants. The questions we received, as you know, the recording will be available on various channels, including on YouTube. And so we expect far more visitors and participants in this really important discussion. So thank you again for all of you for this really stimulating discussion. Thank you. Hereby I close the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
We can start. Can start. First of all, a warm welcome to all participants to this final plenary session of the first Vision Zero Fund high-level forum. And thank you all for having joined us. We have seen recently a growing interest on occupational safety and health for decent work and sustainable development. And this is clearly the case of this event, where we have had the pleasure to have up so far an audience of around 6,000 people following us, in particular through social media and coming from all corners of the world. My name is Joaquim Pintado Nunes, and I am the chief of the ILO's Labor Administration, Labor Inspection, and Occupational Safety and Health branch. This is the branch responsible for developing global guidance and providing technical assistance to ILO member states to strengthen the institutions with responsibilities on occupational safety and health. This, of course, as a means to effectively implement relevant ILO standards on this core technical area and in assisting the conditions for ratification of these standards. As part of our flagship program, Safety and Health for All, the Vision Zero Fund is a multi-donor fund that has assisted us over the last 5 years to give practice to our mission, bringing direct improvements to the lives of more than 5 million workers in 3 continents and working together with constituents in a way to advance needed and required institutional reforms. As mentioned throughout this forum, the Vision Zero Fund implements a model of collective action for safe and healthy supply chains. This model is defined as a multi-stakeholder approach that involves governments, workers and trade unions, employers and their organizations, multilateral organizations, civil society and development agencies, all working together so to implement actions to reduce severe or fatal work accidents, injuries, or diseases in global supply chains. Our ambition, of course, is to get closer and closer to the aim of zero fatalities and zero harm in workplaces. We can say that we have advanced quite a lot, but there is still a long, long road ahead of us. This last session of the forum intends to stimulate a dialogue on what can we expect from the VZF in the near future, and how can the collective action approach contribute in practice to push forward the significance of occupational safety and health. We will hear from governments, social partners, and OSH practitioners how the various actors in supply chains can use the Vision Zero Fund unique model and its convening power to work together to improve safety and health in supply chains. I'd like to start by briefly addressing some housekeeping matters. For this session, as for other sessions, we have interpretation in English, French, and Spanish. You can change the language at the icon in the bottom of your screen, somewhere around here. You can also put questions to the panelists using the Q&A box. And apologies already, because we will not be able to respond to all the questions. We will select some of them to present to our panelists, but nonetheless, we will take due note of all of your questions and observations for further work of the VZF. I would like now to introduce the panelists for today's session. We have with us Miss Martha Newton, the Deputy Director General for Policy from the ILO. Welcome, Ms. Newton. We have Ms. Anoucheh Carvar, representative of the French government to the ILO and the Labor and Employment Senior Task Officer to the G7 and the G20. Welcome, Ms. Carvar. We have Mr. Ralph Franke, the Global Head of Environment, Health and Safety from Siemens. We have Mr. Chris de Mister, Senior Advisor to the Federation of Enterprises from Belgium. We have Mr. Rory O'Neill, Occupational Health and Safety Advisor from the International Trade Union Confederation. We also have with us Ms. Sue Longley, General Secretary from IUF. And finally, we are also pleased to welcome to this session Mr. Alan Stevens, the Head of Strategic Engagement from IOSH, the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health. Thank you all for being here, first of all. And I'd like to start by asking Martha some initial remarks. Martha, what do you think is valuable about VZF's collective action approach, and how can it contribute to the ILO's work on improving and pushing for decent work in global supply chains? Please, Martha.
Thank you, Joachim, and thank you for everyone who have joined us today. I'm Martha Newton. I'm the Deputy Director General for Policy here at the ILO. And even though I've been in my role for about 4 or 5 months, I'm fairly new to the ILO, but I'm not new to the work of the Vision Zero Fund. I was able to see firsthand as a government representative the impact of the work of Vision Zero Fund in multiple sectors around the globe. But occupational safety and health and decent work in global supply chains are both topics that have been high on ILO's agenda in recent years. And now, even more than ever, we're looking at best solutions and contemplating, how we're going to work on ending this pandemic. And occupational safety and health is a big part of that answer. As Director General Guy Ryder pointed out earlier this week at this event in his opening remarks, occupational safety and health has been at the core of ILO's work since the founding of the institution in 1919. In recent work, in respect to of decent work in global supply chains, the work of the ILO has been coordinated in a 5-year program of action, which grew out of a general discussion on decent work in global supply chains at the 2016 International Labor Conference. In its midterm review of the action program at the end of 2019, the ILO governing body recognized the Vision Zero Fund as, quote, the most prominent programs in global supply chains that have helped improve compliance with core ILO standards and national legislation, while also increasing the competitiveness of enterprises. We're proud of that. But during the GDB discussion, members made several references to the Vision Zero Fund, recognizing it for taking a strategic approach to linking knowledge generation and technical assistance, and for using applied research to pilot replicable and scalable intervention models in global supply chains. In particular, the fund's collective action approach is closely aligned with the 5th action area of the Global Supply Chains Action Plan, which promotes partnerships and policy coherence. This action area in turn contributes to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Goal 17, which recognizes that multi-stakeholder partnerships are important vehicles for mobilizing and sharing knowledge, expertise, technology, and financial resources to support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals in all countries, and particularly in developing countries. But I think what underpins the fund's collective action approach is the recognition that addressing endemic occupational safety and health challenges requires the collective action, influence, and resources of all major stakeholders in global supply chains. We recognize that the responsibility to address decent work deficits in global supply chains can't be that of one actor alone. The 2016 resolution on global supply chains made it clear that governments, businesses, and social partners each have a distinct role to play. The resolution also makes it clear that despite the fact that these roles are distinct and delineated, they need to be exercised in close collaboration and coordination with other supply chain actors to ensure policy coherence at the global, regional, sectoral, and national levels. The idea of shared but collective responsibility is also reflected in the ILO's M&E Declaration. The declaration, which was amended and adopted in 2017, outlines the roles that different actors have in ensuring decent work for all, including in supply chains, and addresses recommendations to governments, enterprises, employers, and worker organizations. Again, a clear recognition that despite the discrete roles of different supply chain actors, sustainable progress to advance decent work can only be made if these roles are exercised jointly and collectively. So this is precisely why we find that the Vision Zero Fund's collective action approach is so promising, and why we encourage all supply chain actors to join together under the auspices and convening power of the fund to address safety and health challenges in global supply chains. I would close my remarks probably by saying, Joachim, that it's probably somewhat prophetic that in 2016, that the Vision Zero Fund was created. It was created to find real answers to global challenges, and there couldn't be a greater challenge than what we're all facing today. But we must continue to bring together global companies, national level suppliers, governments, workers, and trade unions, civil society and development agencies to design joint solutions. The Vision Zero Fund's approach holds great promise for better, safer, and more sustainable future for those working in global supply chains. So we thank you all for being here today. I look forward to hearing from the other panelists, and let's start the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha. And we are all here to look for sustainable solutions through the model of collective action, not only to address the current pandemic, but also future global challenges in terms of occupational safety and health. I will now turn to Ms. Anousheh Carvar. Madame Carvar, la France soutient activement le Fonds Vision Zéro depuis 2017. Et la France est aussi un membre actif de ces structures de gouvernance, en particulier son comité directeur. Qu'est-ce qui a attiré la France vers le VZF et quels sont les principaux atouts et le potentiel de la démarche d'action collective du VZF selon vous? Madame Carvar, s'il vous plaît. Je pense qu'on ne peut pas vous entendre, Madame Carvar.
Je vais activer mon micro. Est-ce que ça va maintenant?
Oui, oui, merci.
Très bien. Tout d'abord, permettez-moi de remercier l'OIT et le secrétariat du Fonds Vision Zéro pour votre invitation et pour la tenue de cet événement. Je voudrais également féliciter les équipes du BIT, en particulier celles du département que vous dirigez, Joachim, pour leur engagement et leur implication sans faille, notamment ces derniers mois. La question de la sécurité et de la santé des individus au travail, bien plus qu'un concept ou qu'une série de normes, est une réalité concrète pour des millions de travailleurs et d'employeurs. La pandémie actuelle, le maintien en activité des travailleurs de la première ligne ou encore les discontinuités dans les chaînes de valeur mondiales nous l'ont rappelé. La santé et sécurité au travail est au cœur du mandat de justice sociale de l'OIT et au cœur des priorités françaises. À ce titre, la France soutient la démarche inscrite dans la déclaration du centenaire de l'OIT visant à faire des conditions de travail sûres et saines un principe et droit fondamental au travail. Loin de se limiter à une simple reconnaissance politique, cette démarche va contribuer à un nivellement par le haut des normes sociales, en particulier dans les chaînes de valeur, mais aussi par le levier d'action et de promotion que représentent les clauses sociales dans les accords commerciaux bilatéraux ou régionaux. Pour répondre plus précisément à votre question, Joachim, la France a soutenu le projet VZF dès sa conception en 2015 lors de la réunion des ministres du Travail du G7 à Berlin. Nous étions tous marqués à cette époque par le drame de Rana Plaza, qui interrogeait tragiquement nos responsabilités individuelles et collectives. Et nous avions la volonté que de telles situations ne se reproduisent plus jamais. La France a été le premier pays à prendre le sujet à bras-le-corps en légiférant dans le but d'améliorer les conditions de travail dans les chaînes d'approvisionnement mondiales. Nous avons adopté en 2017 la loi relative au devoir de vigilance des sociétés mères et des entreprises donneuses d'ordre. Cette loi demande aux plus grandes entreprises françaises d'établir, publier, respecter et évaluer un plan de vigilance qui identifie les risques d'atteinte grave envers les droits humains, envers la santé et sécurité des personnes et envers l'environnement dans toutes leurs sphères d'influence, les filiales comme les sous-traitants. Cette loi est un levier puissant d'action pour les grandes entreprises françaises, mais nous estimons que ce sujet ne peut pas être traité dans un seul pays ou par la seule loi. Pour favoriser des conditions de concurrence loyales entre pays et entre entreprises, nous devons créer une dynamique collective mondiale autour de cette question. Les accords cadres mondiaux conclus entre les fédérations syndicales internationales et les entreprises multinationales sont de bons instruments pour compléter la loi. Depuis Danone en 92 jusqu'à EDF ou Total plus récemment, les multinationales françaises ont inclut le sujet de la santé-sécurité au travail dans les chaînes de sous-traitance dans leurs accords cadres, qui sont le fruit du dialogue social transnational exigeant. L'OIT, par sa composition tripartite et par son expertise, doit jouer un rôle plus important dans la promotion du dialogue social international. Elle pourra exercer une vigilance quant à l'inclusion des clauses favorables à la santé-sécurité dans ces accords. La santé et la sécurité au travail est un sujet trop important pour que nous puissions nous satisfaire de résultats ponctuels et inégaux. Pour l'éviter, le VZF est bien placé pour fédérer la bonne volonté et les énergies de toutes les parties prenantes de la santé-sécurité au travail. C'est ce même principe qui guide par exemple l'Alliance 8.7 que j'ai l'honneur de présider. Ce partenariat mondial réunit autour de la lutte contre le travail des enfants, le travail forcé, la traite des êtres humains, les organisations internationales, les partenaires sociaux mondiaux, les gouvernements, les réseaux d'entreprises, les ONG. En s'appuyant sur les mandats tripartites de l'OIT, cette approche multi-acteurs sera, j'en suis convaincue, un gage d'efficacité et de succès pour le VZF, comme Martha Newton vient si brillamment de le démontrer. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Carvar. C'est sûr que le soutien de la France au Fonds Vision Zéro nous a permis d'achever de très bons résultats dans les pays où on a des interventions. Et pour ça, je profite pour vous remercier. I will now turn to Dr. Ralph Franco from Siemens. And I'd like also to ask him for his opening remarks, especially representing the private sector, which is an essential player when it comes to developing policy and implementing measures for prevention against occupational hazards and disease. Dr. Franke, Siemens became the first multinational enterprise to join the VZF already in 2017. And you recently have extended your affiliation with the fund for one additional year. Similar to the question I asked to Madame Carvar, what attracted Siemens to the fund, and what are the opportunities that you see for collaboration with other actors under the auspices of the VZF for the upcoming next years? Dr. Frank, please.
Thank you very much, Joachim. I can remember when we joined the Vision Zero Fund in 2017. And when we were asked to join the Vision Zero Fund, it was not 1 second to think about it, whether we should or whether we should not, because I think this is a great opportunity to join forces to improve the working conditions, especially in developing countries. And with my colleagues, with my more than 1,500 EHS colleagues in Siemens, we take care of roughly 290,000 employees and thousands of contractors. And we conduct business in over 200 countries around the globe. And I mean, we want to generate value for the societies in which we operate. That is what business to society means for us at Siemens. With that, I think we have the potential to make lasting and positive impact on the people and environment through our business. And we are committed to make work conditions and work environments healthier and safer, especially in areas where the standards are poor, like in developing countries. Especially here, we have big challenges to create a work environment which is safe not only for our own employees, but also for all our partners, like thousands of contractors. These challenges we share with other multinational companies as well. And instead of everyone tries to improve the health and safety in these countries by their own, it would make sense to team up. That's a reason why we support and engage with partners that share our ambition. So the Vision Zero Fund is such a partner. As part of a strong coalition with companies, NGOs, and governments, we can join forces to make a sustainable difference. From my point of view, it would make sense to follow a more countrywide setup of projects and not sector specific as of now. And if you do not change the safety mindset or the safety culture in a whole country, you will fall back in old patterns as before once you finish a sector targeted project in this country. Countrywide approaches would be also attract other companies from different sectors to join the Vision Zero Fund. And following the example, I give you an example, the Charter of Trust. Here Siemens signed in 2018, together with other companies, the Charter for Greater Cybersecurity with binding rules and standards to build trust in cybersecurity and further advance digitalization. And a recent example in another sector is the Charter of Principles for Good Platform Work, initiated by the World Economic Forum to help platform companies to improve working standards in the gig economy. So what we need is a common approach into this direction, sharing experiences and practical approaches, and also data for the benefit of all. And as Siemens, we want to maintain and enable work environments where people can work safely, enjoy good health, and thrive both at work and in their contributions to society. And with the joint forces of the Vision Zero Fund, I think we can make the use of synergies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Franke. And I'm sure that Siemens can lead through good example and good practice in this very important area, which is occupational safety and health. So we'll stay now with the employers, and I would invite Chris DeMister to take the floor. Chris, the IOE favors constructive collaboration between workers, employers, and governments to address decent work in global supply chains. IOE is also an active member of the VZF Advisory Committee, which, by the way, developed the fund's collective action approach. So what does the IOE see as valuable about this approach of collective action? And how can collaboration with the VZF strengthen the efforts of multinational companies and the employers' organizations to further promote occupational safety and health? Chris, the floor is yours, please.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon to all. Well, there are several reasons why we, as the organization that represents the international business community, why we are supportive of this approach and the Vision Zero funds. And the first one that I would like to mention, and I think Ralph Franke already touched upon it, is the importance of the creation of a level playing field for businesses, including on occupational safety and health. We don't want, and I guess nobody wants, that occupational safety and health becomes an element of competition in the sense of financial competition between companies. It should be an element of competition when it comes to selecting outstanding partners or as we discuss supply chains or value chains, that you use occupational safety and health indeed to step up the performance of companies that are part of your supply chain. But you get the point that I'm trying to make. We don't want this to be an element of financial competition between companies. So we think these kind of global approaches can help to level the playing field. Secondly, and quite important also for businesses, and especially for larger businesses, multinationals. That is that if you can have globally shared efforts, global procedures, it will make your operation more efficient and effective. And that is also true for when it comes to occupational safety and health. So the more global approaches we can develop and roll out, the more beneficial they are, not only for the workers, of course, because in the end, that's why we do it, but also for the business, because the approach, a global approach, will be more efficient. Thirdly, all of us getting behind the same flag means you also create visibility, and visibility can then or is then an anchor point for multinationals and for employer organizations, an anchor point for their action. You can immediately see, oh, we're all part of the same approach, of the same club, let me say so, that is aiming for better health and safety performance. So the visibility, the fact that we're all behind one kind of approach is also helpful. And then what do we think the kind of actions we deem necessary or would like to focus us on is, first of all, do not reinvent the wheel. We should draw from lessons learned from projects, from countries, from companies to see and how those good practices can be used and can be replicated, can be multiplied. So this is an important one, and the more global your action, the more likely you are to touch upon good practices that can really be used also by others. One very important and if not crucial element is also to continue to invest in capacity building, because with capacity building, you can address the root causes of the problems. A preventive approach is always better than a curative one. So, and also the OSH implementation gap that still exists in different countries and even between companies. In order to bridge that gap, in order to really get the best performance out of each and every single company, we need to step up, or we need to continue to invest in capacity building, not only at enterprise level, but also at the supportive level of the employers' organizations. And that leads me to the final point, and that is the employers' organizations as such, internationally, regionally, nationally. We think the involvement of employers' organizations is critical to inform and to enrich the projects, because we think in order to get real leverage, you really need employers' organizations to reach out to the individual companies, particularly also the smaller ones. Okay, if you focus on global supply chains and you focus on the bigger players, then you have leverage, but it also means that automatically you will end up in dealing with very small entities, sometimes very specialized, sometimes with a lot of or lacking the knowledge and understanding. So that is where we can step in as employers' organizations to make sure we really reach out to each and every single company that is part of a more global chain or matrix, because the economy, of course, is not linear. It's more a matrix. We're all interlinked. So that is why we see a critical role also for employers' organizations. I will stop here with this first intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. And as a matter of fact, there are still many challenges ahead of us. And together with employers and their organizations, of course, workers, unions and other forms of worker representation are very important players in terms of advocating and also assisting to implement occupational safety and health measures in workplaces. So I'll now turn to Rory O'Neill from ITUC. Rory, and I'm going to quote you, sorry for this, I hope you allow me. You once wrote that there is no more natural union function than defending the health and safety of its members. And you also said it is a reason people join unions, and it is a reason people stay in unions. So I will ask you, what value do you see as a trade unionist, but also as a safety and health expert, in the Vision Zero Fund, and in particular, the efforts of the fund to promote this collaborative action among all actors to make supply chains safer across the world. Chris, Rory, the floor is yours, please. Rory, you're mute.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Rakin. First, I'll say what unions do, and then I'll say how it relates to the Vision Zero Fund and the ILO's work, if that's okay. ITUC has over 200 million members in 300 affiliates in over 160 countries, and that's where our influence and power lies. There's a simple illustration why safety is a critical union role. The substantial union safety effect, where work-related injuries and diseases are significantly lower where there's an active union presence. And it's never been more visible than during this pandemic. One example, a US study found that in unionized nursing homes, not only were workers better protected, but so were residents. Mortality amongst residents was 30% lower from COVID-19. So workers were protected more and residents were protected more as a consequence. We saw the same effect with the Bangladesh Accord, where a coalition involving ILO unions and the government and employers was more effective by far than an employer-only led initiative, and has led to lasting change. How do unions achieve the union safety effect? Well, we can't do it without having the capacity and the power to make things happen. This means recruiting, retaining union members, and ensuring union reps have the training, knowledge, bargaining skills, support, and strategies they need. At the workplace level, this means having on-the-ground union reps listening to the membership, investigating risks, and representing the workplace as a whole. And it's worth remembering there's not a labour inspector in every workplace. There are workers in every workplace, and there are union reps in every unionised workplace. So we're a constant presence for the union message. We run campaigns on issues from asbestos to zoonosis to raise awareness and demands for better work. On 28th of April this year, we'll mark International Workers' Memorial Day, the biggest single event on the health and safety calendar anywhere, an event supported as the World Day by the ILO. Unions have a special role in that they deal with real life health and safety. I spoke to the World Health Organization this week about mental health at work and how it recognizes the determinants of health that affect mental health. Those include labor protection, low pay, job insecurity, a lack of voice and a lack of influence over what you do and how you do it. From a union perspective, health and safety at work should encompass the same broad determinants of health. It's not just about dangerous things or dangerous processes or unhealthy processes, but wider factors and rights affecting the ability to act at work, and that includes employment protection. You must remember workers get fired for raising safety concerns, as have been demonstrated at Amazon, at food processors, major global food processors, and other workplaces in the pandemic. The tools we use to achieve this involve representation and bargaining, workplace mapping, inspections and investigations, all the way through to industrial action to force our message home. We form networks and alliances by issue or by sector. But our power lies in having the organisation and the collective strength to both raise our voice and make our voice heard in the workplace and beyond. We represent workers at national and international level through bipartite negotiations agreements, labour rights and safety clauses in procurement agreements, and through tripartite structures, including, of course, the ILO, but also including other UN structures like SACEM, GHS, and the ILO convened Global Coalition on Occupational Safety and Health. Onto the Vision Zero Fund. It was raised in Tuesday's opening session if the Vision Zero Fund should be expanded. Well, in a globalized economy, every country needs a robust ILO. It's worth noting that the richest nations are not always the safest or the best regulated, and they leave global fingerprints, not least through their activities in their multinationals based there and their supply chains abroad. But we'll never get a Vision Zero Fund expanded by a factor of 25 to cover all these countries, even if it was desirable. At its very best, the Vision Zero Fund is an example of what can be done in difficult circumstances through enabling effective collaboration between governments, unions and employers. And we welcome Martha's comments on collaboration being key between all parties, all stakeholders. But what we need worldwide is the everyday, no bells and whistles ILO to have the dedicated resources on health and safety to do its job. We need the ILO to have the resources to support ratification and effective implementation of existing instruments. We need ILO to have the resources and support to develop new instruments to fill gaps, notably on biological hazards and psychosocial hazards, neither of which have a dedicated convention, and both of which were identified as dangerous holes in ILO's tripartite review of workplace safety instruments in 2017 and 2018. Unions warned then that there would inevitably be another SARS or another MERS, both caused by coronaviruses, and that we needed to be prepared globally for emerging hazards. When I first visited ILO in the 1980s, it had its own section, Safe Work, and several times the resources and staff it had today dedicated to health and safety. Now it is a depleted section within a section. Joachim and his colleagues do admirable work for which they deserve our gratitude, and they do it in hand with social partners, again, a great strength. But if ILO is going to have the influence on health and safety we all agree it deserves, a real Vision Zero, then these resources need to be reinstated. ILO needs to demonstrate that it matters not just in countries where Vision Zero Fund can operate, but everywhere where there are workers at work. We also need health and safety to have a top priority ranking within ILO, which means recognition as a fundamental right at work. The right to life, to come home from work undamaged by toxics, machines, oppressive working conditions, or viruses, is as fundamental as it gets. The International Labour Conference has already accepted health and safety should be there alongside instruments on child labour, freedom of association, right to collective bargaining, and forced labour as a fundamental right. After the pandemic, there's never been a more obvious and urgent need. We just need to make sure now that it happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rory, for this very comprehensive intervention. And I'd like to stay with the workers and now give the floor to Stu Longley from IUF. Stu, as you know, the VZF is quite active in agriculture. And we all know that this sector is characterized by unsafe working conditions, due, for instance, to the use of chemicals, among many, many other occupational hazards, but also due to informality and the fact that we have huge deficits of information, both in relation to workers and to employers. Also, there is a lack of enforcement and a lack of guidance towards especially the smaller companies which are active in the sector. So I would also ask you the same, where do you see the value of VZF to work in countries through this collective action model? And where do you see yourself also collaborating, with this approach? Stu, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joachim, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to this very important panel. Just quickly to introduce the IUF, with a global trade union representing workers throughout the food chain, so in agriculture, food processing, and hospitality. We represent many millions of agricultural workers around the world. Just to be clear, in terms of also the cooperation with the Vision Zero Fund. I also want to say that we don't have many small farmers in our membership. Our membership is essentially hired workers, people working for a wage. So we do very much welcome the fund's focus on agriculture. And as you've just said, it really is needed. Agriculture is a huge workforce globally, about 1.1 billion people, of which 40% are employed. And according to the ILO, a sector with many, many decent work deficits. It's poor working conditions. It's the biggest user of child labour, heavily dependent on migrant and seasonal workers, and those workers too often in highly exploitative conditions. And as we will address today, and as has been addressed earlier, very poor occupational safety and health conditions, including a very high fatality rate. Just want to pick up one thing, Joachim. You mentioned just now the informality in the sector. And of course, you're right. There is a lot too much, I would say, informal work in agriculture, precarious employment, seasonal work, all of these things. But I do think it's important to stress that agriculture itself is not the informal sector. It's the sector which gets food from the field to our plates. And in many ways, it's highly formalized with food safety requirements, phytosanitary measures, etc. We actually think that agricultural labor markets need to receive much more attention. They do need regulation and enforcement that informality needs to be addressed. And I welcome the comments in the earlier session from the IOE about the need to address informality. A good example for us would be, for instance, the new legislation that's being adopted in Germany to end the use of subcontracting in the meat sector and to limit the use of temporary work. This is a real lesson, a real example that we can all learn from. But turning to the specifics you asked me about, the advice and cooperation, and of course I'm delighted to give our comments on that. I do think the first point, and this has been highlighted in previous speakers, is that we really need to understand more about where the power lies in global supply chains. And I think it's important that the project recognizes the challenges around this. It's not with our members, it's not with the small farmers or with the agricultural workers, it's with the plantation owners, with the commodity traders, with the processors and with the retailers. And for us, addressing this power imbalance is absolutely critical to ensuring that we can work effectively on occupational safety and health. And of course, the key way to do that is to ensure that workers and farmers can exercise fully their rights to freedom of association and come together for workers in trade unions and for small farmers in their organizations and co-ops. However, very sadly, there is still a major challenge for this. As I said, the power relationships are unequal. In some countries, there are legal barriers, and the geography of the isolation can also be challenging for us as trade unions. I acknowledge that. I think it's interesting that when the ILO was founded very early on, it recognized these power imbalances, and Convention 11, adopted 100 years ago, actually calls on governments to undertake to secure to all of those engaged in agriculture the same rights of association and combination as industrial workers. However, and again turning to an ILO document, a report issued in 2015, giving a voice to rural workers, found that in some countries, conditions had not improved much beyond that of when the convention was adopted in 1921. So for us, this focus in the project on fundamental rights, in particular freedom of association as the key enabling right, is absolutely critical to ensure that we can work on safety and health, on elimination of child labor, on ending discrimination. It's the key enabling right. Collective action, in our opinion, requires workers and small farmers to be able to come together and to act collectively. So we'd like to see the project going forward, strengthening the focus on promoting ratification and implementation of the ILO standards for agriculture, Convention 11, Convention 141, Convention 129 on labour inspection, and of course the key Convention 184 on safety and health in agriculture. We understand and we would welcome a move in the project to expand more into plantations. And in that case, it would be important also to draw on Convention 110. And I'm going to add another one to the list that maybe would be not so expected, but it's really important as we go forward. And if you do take on work in plantations, to also look at how we can implement the newest Convention 190 on the elimination of violence and harassment in the world of work. We know from our experience that sexual harassment is widespread in agriculture, and it's getting worse in the pandemic as women workers in precarious employment are forced to give sexual favors to get or to keep their jobs. So there's really lots of practical measures we could do together based on those conventions. My second point is we've heard in many panels today and from previous speakers about the importance of due diligence. And of course, we have also the OECD guidelines. I think it's really important that we look at how these due diligence obligations could be used more in the project to get better accountability along supply chains. The RUF is already working on this. We use our global framework agreements, not just with the employers directly signatories to those agreements, but also to raise supply chain issues. And we're also now developing memorandum of agreements with retailers to work together to improve working conditions in agricultural supply chains. So looking at this leverage, I think is really important to drive the change that will be so important in the agricultural sector. And my final point, just to underline what other colleagues have said, it's absolutely fundamental that occupational health and safety gets a better profile, a higher profile in the ILO. As Rory said, there have been severe cuts, and we would like to see that reversed. And the other major change that we would like to see, along with the workers' group and our sister global unions, is the promotion of the Occupational Health and Safety Conventions to be ranked among the fundamental principles. I think COVID-19 has really underlined that we need to step up the work globally on occupational health and safety, and this would be a key way to do it. So thank you for my initial thoughts.
Thank you very much, Sue, also for your very complete insights and views. And just by the way, we are considering going into plantation, so I think that we'll be talking to you very, very soon. And I'd like to turn now to Ellen Stevens. Ellen, IOSH is the largest membership organization for safety and health professionals in the whole world. And I know that you have been exploring different forms of collaboration with VZF. So I'd like to ask you, what attracts you to VZF, and what attracts you in particular when it comes to the collective action model, and what do you see as your collaboration with VZF and other actors so that we could bring meaningful changes into the world of work, and more particularly into occupational safety and health. Ellen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joachim. Hello, everybody. To answer part of that question is really simple. In the same way that Ralph said, our commitment to the Vision Zero Fund is based around our shared common vision and for a safe and healthy world of work. Why wouldn't you? We have rightly heard already so many positive reasons why, but I'd like to pause just for a moment, please. And throughout the conference, we've talked a lot about statistics, about numbers. But if you permit me, please, to say that these aren't numbers. What we're talking about are real people with real names, fathers, mothers, sons, wives, daughters, cousins, friends, neighbours, work colleagues, who just like us want a good life. They want to raise a family, they want to pay their bills, whose dreams and potential are robbed by workplace harm, and by workplace harm that we know and we've heard through this conference is largely preventable. With the tools at our disposal in 2021, it shouldn't matter where you live, what industry you work in, and what role you perform. People have the right to good working conditions, and we collectively have the capability, and I argue the obligation, to make sure that workers return home safe at the end of the day, both safe and healthy. Our shared ethos is that through collaboration with key stakeholders here today, collectively, we can influence the agenda and enhance not only the OSH profession that we at IOSH represent, but as a consequence, enhance the lives of the workers, those our members and our profession serve. The Vision Zero Fund provides the perfect vehicle for this, and we congratulate the amazing work of the fund that we've heard so much about over the past 3 days. But clearly, we still have so much to do. If we're to drive positive movements towards sustained OSH improvements, together we have to create even stronger systems where governments, regulators, investors, OSH practitioners and professionals, employers, and the workers' representative bodies all work more closely together to embed good OSH practice into the hearts of everything we do. We congratulate the support of the Vision Zero Fund focus on the hard-to-reach sectors such as agriculture and the garment industry, which meets the challenge most frequently asked of IOSH and where we also seek to focus. We are already working actively in supporting these sectors, for example, with our work with Nike in Asia that Choke referenced earlier in the conference, where we're working together to drive positive, disruptive change at scale and with reach right throughout their supply chain. We have so many positive factors at our disposal here, but our post-COVID collective challenge we face ahead is one of a more fragmented, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous virtual workplace that we will possibly have seen since the Industrial Revolution. New OSH challenges of controls in this context require stronger underpinning systems anchoring in good OSH practice at the heart of everything we do. Exactly what the Vision Zero Fund is striving to achieve and exactly what's been said by the speakers so far. Right now, we see tremendous alignment and commitment across all the stakeholders. For example, governments in Asia and Africa are building really exciting OSH national strategies, and we're proud of our contributions with the governments of Malaysia, Nigeria, and Ghana, to name a few. These plans are crucial for their economies as they're key to inward investment as consumers and investors become more focused, not just on the product, but how it's produced, the impact on the environment, and the impact on the lives of those that produce the goods, the workers. Equally, good OSH practice is critical in reducing the burden on social security systems. Our good friends at the International Social Security Association, ISA, are doing some amazing work in this space, which again, we fully support. Specifically, their work around leading indicators and how artificial intelligence can drive the information feeding into leading indicators would greatly, we believe, enhance prevention rather than cure, just as been said earlier today. We hope to continue our work with organisations, multinational and local organisations, like we've heard from Siemens and Nike, and like so many organisations represented this week, who see good OSH practice as a benefit, not a cost, as a healthy profit that makes good common business sense, where their brand integrity and their moral obligation to good OSH practice extends right throughout their payroll, their supply chain, way beyond their payroll. And we support workers' organisations and bodies and the unions in their drive to ensure that all people possess the skills and prioritise the capability to lead, manage and work safely and healthily as a core competence and an expectation shared and valued by every worker. As Rory said, the workers are in the workplace every day, not just for periodic inspections. At the heart of that sits honest reporting without negative consequences for those that declare risk. So to conclude, I believe we have a special moment in history. We can seize the moment together. We have to act now. We have no time to lose. The Vision Zero Fund provides the opportunity to fulfill our obligation to move towards a safe and healthy world of work. At IOSH, our members hope to play a significant role in this great movement through delivering OSH technical assistance. We thank you, Joachim, for allowing OSH to participate in this conference, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with the Vision Zero Fund going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And of course that we cannot promote safety and health at work without the involvement of the OSH experts. And we now came to the moment where we have some questions from the audience. And I have one here that seems to me quite interesting, and I'd like to address it to three of our speakers, Ralph, Chris, and Sue. And the question is as follows, and I would ask you to respond back in no longer than 3 minutes, please. In general, subcontracting companies find it more challenging to implement safety and health measures at their level than the parent companies. So I would ask you, what you see as being the best options to advance safety and health at work when it comes to the lower tiers of the supply chain, and namely when we have the mother companies working with their subcontracting enterprises. So I would start with Ralph, please. Ralph, the floor is yours.
Yeah, first of all, this is a very important question, and we at Siemens, we feel responsible for everyone who works for Siemens, might it a normal employee or a subcontracted or subcontracted employee, and we try that everyone who works for Siemens can return healthy back home to their friends and families like they started in the morning their work. And we do a lot. So like we start with the supplier selection process where we have clear criteria to check whether the contractor has a good health and safety management in place. We check the health and safety performance figures. Then we also audit all the contractors during their performance when they work for us. And once we see that they have some issues or problems to perform like we expect to perform, then we help them. We initiated and set up training centers, for instance, in India, where we train contractors how to work safely. We did that in Egypt, we did that in Africa. So that's a lot of investment, what we do to qualify our contractors to the same level like our own employees. And this is also a good opportunity, what I mentioned already in my short speech, that here we should do more and more on a country level together with all the stakeholders here in that round and also other multinationals, because once we only concentrate on certain sectors, then we miss a lot of opportunities. I hope I stick to the 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Ralph. And we will now continue with the employers. Chris, can you share your views on this with the audience, please?
Yeah, I think the initial question was in French, so I will answer in French. Tout d'abord, il faut éviter de généraliser. Quand vous dites les entreprises sous-traitantes ne respectent pas les droits des travailleurs, il faut faire attention parce que ça part de l'idée que l'entreprise sous-traitante est petite, n'a rien à dire et que le donneur d'ordre est une grande entreprise. Souvent, ce n'est pas le cas. Les entreprises sous-traitantes sont souvent beaucoup plus spécialisés et peuvent effectuer les travaux dans des conditions beaucoup plus sécures que le donneur d'ordre. Le nettoyage industriel, travaux de construction, informatique, etc. C'est logique que c'est sous-traité. Mais je comprends la question. Vous parlez effectivement de la situation dont Ralph a parlé aussi. C'est des centaines d'entreprises sous-traitantes, même sous-sous-traitants qui viennent travailler de manière journalière sur le terrain d'une grande entreprise donneuse d'ordre. Et là, je pense la bonne approche, et c'est pour ça que le Vision Zero Fund est tellement important, chercher des bonnes pratiques. Il y a pas mal de pays où il y a des organisations, où il y a des systèmes de gestion de sécurité de sous-traitance. Par exemple, moi-même, je suis directeur d'une organisation de gestion de la sécurité dans la sous-traitance en Belgique. Il y a des organisations similaires en France, Pays-Bas, Allemagne, Suisse, Autriche, partout au monde. Et là, par le biais de cette approche, ce système de gestion de la sécurité de sous-traitance, et comme Ralph a expliqué pour Siemens, on peut effectivement améliorer la sécurité santé, l'approche de ces petites entreprises sous-traitantes. En Belgique, on a même constaté à un certain moment que la prestation des entreprises sous-traitantes était meilleure que celle des donneuses d'ordre, parce que les exigences étaient plus strictes du point de vue sécurité santé pour les travailleurs des entreprises sous-traitantes que pour les propres travailleurs des donneurs d'ordre. Alors ça, c'est la bonne approche, des bonnes pratiques, des systèmes de gestion gérés, et j'ai oublié de mentionner qu'ils sont gérés ensemble, organisations d'employeurs, on collabore avec les syndicats pour mettre les critères. Alors ça, c'est la bonne approche. Et je pense que Ralph a oublié qu'en ce moment, on est en train, lui, moi et quelques autres, d'effectivement explorer un moyen pour donner une formation de base aux travailleurs des entreprises sous-traitantes, une approche, une idée mondiale. Alors là, on poursuit sur cette voie parce que ça, effectivement, peut améliorer la situation tant pour l'entreprise donneuse d'ordre que pour les travailleurs des entreprises sous-traitantes. Merci.
Merci à toi, Chris. So now moving to the workers, Sue, we heard the employers. What would you add to what was said already from the workers' perspective? Sue, please.
Thanks, Joachim. I agree really with very much the sentiment expressed in the question, and it reflects very much also our experiences. There might well be, and I'm sure there are, as Chris has just said, some very decent contractors out there, But I think our concern is that often subcontracting is used to bypass employment relationships. And I would also say there's a lot of pressure, increasing pressure these days for what I would call fake self-employment. So all of these things I need to present increased challenges to making sure that occupational safety and health requirements are really fulfilled. I think there's two key roads for us to go down. I do think the legal framework is really important. I mentioned in my opening remarks the measures that the German government has taken to deal with subcontracting in the meat sector. And it was very, very clear that the awful outbreaks of COVID-19 that we saw across the meat industry, not just in Germany, but in many countries, were linked to the very poor working conditions of the migrant workers hired through labor agents, through subcontractors. So regulating that is really important, and also having the regulation and clarity around the employment relationship. So for example, we would welcome the recent ruling in the UK government clarifying the role of Uber drivers, that they are not self-employed, but that they are workers and they have rights. And with those rights, of course, comes the right to safe and healthy workplaces. I think our other thing, and this is as a global trade union, we very much engaged with companies around these issues. So I would look, for example, for instance, to the use of subcontracting in logistics systems. We've done major work with our sister organization, the Transport Workers Federation, exposing the really appalling conditions for truck drivers at the end of the subcontracting chains. Now, big companies might well make a very good contract with one of the big logistics companies, but that gets subcontracted down, subcontracted down, subcontracted down. And I think it's coming together, and something like the project, this fund could offer a framework for doing that, of bringing everybody together. The companies need to admit they've got a problem. We help them to get the information, the real conditions in those supply chains, in the subcontracting agreements, and together we can work to improve the conditions. But I think acknowledging the problem is there and committing to work together on to solve it is absolutely key. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And as we have the voice of, two voices from the employers, I'd also like Rory to jump in and give us also your views very quickly, Rory, because we are running a bit out of time. Rory, please go ahead.
Okay, I'll just add things that Sue didn't quite mention this time. There are existing instruments, of course, the OECD guidelines on multinational enterprises and the UN guidelines on business and human rights, but we need to make sure that they actually become part of the dialogue about workplace safety, not that they're separate to it. There's also the danger that we see of outsourcing of risk as well as outsourcing of work. So the hazardous jobs are sent overseas to developing nations where there may be less labour regulation or enforcement. We're also seeing export of hazards quite a lot, so that rich Western nations like mine, the UK, produce paraquat and export that to India and other nations where workers are poisoned routinely with it. We cannot have those double standards where major multinationals think something are not allowed to sell a product in their own country, but will export it to another. You know, the suicide rates in India are directly related in some instances to the volumes of paraquat and other hazardous pesticides that are imported.
Thank you, Rory. And before moving ahead, I'd like to give the opportunity also to other panelists. If you want to add something in relation to this question, please just go ahead. And I'll wait just for a couple of seconds before moving. And
I think, if I may, yeah, just I think one of the things that's been exposed by the furlough schemes is the degree of the peripheral economy, where people have been excluded from the benefits of the furlough schemes, and it's just exposed the degree, even in developed economies like the UK, of how the informal economy is still evident today, and we have to address the inclusion of all, for sure.
Thank you, Alan. So now, before the closing remarks, we have a couple of minutes for a poll, and I would ask colleagues to launch it right now. And I'll start by reading the question, which is as follows. How can the collective action model promoted by the Vision Zero Fund help to be prepared and to better respond to global challenges like COVID-19? It's a multiple choice question, so you may choose as many options as you want. I'll wait for a minute, and in the meantime, I'll read the options as well. Well, and it seems that we already got some answers. So one of the options is by bringing together global and national actors to invest in creating safe and healthy working conditions across all tiers of the supply chain. The second option is by involving all actors that can make a difference to the lives of workers operating in hazardous sectors and often out of reach. A third option, by working more with academia to increase the knowledge base that is missing to support decision makers to prevent and prepare for OSH challenges. And the last one, by using OSH as an entry point to strengthen social dialogue at all levels, global, national, and sectorial. So I'll wait just for 10 seconds, and then we'll see the results. They're starting to show up in my screen. And stop. So a majority of our participants selected the first option. 78% of our audience has selected this option. So which consists of bringing together global and national actors to invest in creating safety and health working conditions across all tiers of the supply chain. This was followed by options number 2 and number 4. Which again ask us to involve all actors with a specific focus on hazardous sectors and those groups that are quite often out of reach. And then the last option, which of course it's very dear to the ILO, strengthening social dialogue and also using OSH as an entry point to strengthen social dialogue at all different levels. So thank you very much. This will be very useful for the forthcoming work of the fund. And now I'd like to move then to our closing remarks. And I'd like to start with Martha. Martha, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joachim, and thank you all so much for joining us today. You know, I think for me, it was particularly heartening and encouraging to hear kind of the consistent message that we're all stronger together. But just, some of the thoughts as I was listening to our distinguished panelists. I mean, Madam Carvar, and it's good to see you again virtually, but just thank you for sharing the example of that the law, can have impact, and also just your leadership on Alliance 8.7 and your commitment to the Vision Zero Fund. Dr. Franca, first of all, you're a pathfinder and an innovator because you, from the private sector, supported Siemens supported us first, and you really have become a door opener for the private sector, and we thank Siemens and your leadership so much for that. But I was really taken about we do have to pay attention to where labor standards are poor, and particularly in developing big countries, and also very much take note and appreciate the recommendation about looking at more countrywide approaches, and that by us working together, that's how we can truly make a sustainable difference. Chris from the IOE, as you were indicating, that we have to really focus and work together on visibility as an anchor point for action, and that we have to all be behind this approach together, and that we have to make sure that we are using that there are good practices. We have to make sure that we're using them, and that they can be mobilized, and that we continue to invest in capacity building. And Rory, first of all, thank you so much for your commitment and leadership and support of the Vision Zero Fund, but just giving the example of unionization in the nursing homes, and showing that by this action that a facility is safer, and that as you said, it's not about dangerous things. It's also there's a broader issue with regards to employment, and that's critical. And I take your point about that the everyday, I think you said, no bells and whistles work, and the importance of resourcing here at the ILO, whether it's consistent work that we're already doing, or forward-looking things like exploring biological hazards and mental health concerns that you mentioned. It's something that I'm very much focused on in my time here, my short time here at the ILO. And Sue, I really just, couldn't agree with you. I mean, the agriculture sector, I'm from a very rural community, and spent my life, volunteering and helping vulnerable victims who were abused on farms, and just the address and the need to address informality and just recognizing the challenges. And I really appreciate your critical recommendations about the specific conventions and actions that you could see, and also just the freedom of association is being key to being an enabling right. And then, I think, Alan, just, something you said about the need for, positive disruption and change at scale. And you brought up an interesting point too, that, seeing that collaboration and can actually reduce the burden on social security systems. And that's something, we're working so diligently on social protection here at the ILO. And that's definitely, I think, an area of collaboration with the Vision Zero Fund for the policy level that we haven't really dived into yet. And we should. But you also brought up, I think, a point that just drives home for everybody, is that behind every data point, there's a mother, a father, a son, a daughter. And, we need to be working collaboratively to make sure that, real people, real lives are safe and healthy. So we're just so delighted that so many people have joined us today just to have this dialogue, and also just joined in partnership with the Vision Zero Fund. And I can assure you that we are working tirelessly here at the ILO to make sure that this grows into a truly global initiative. So, we know that we have here at the ILO, and the Vision Zero Fund has a critical mission, and we're going to do everything we can to work and continue to support its development. So thank you all so much for being here today. Joaquin.
Thank you very much, Martha. Madame Carvar, quel serait votre mot de conclusion, s'il vous plaît?
Voilà, j'active mon micro. Merci beaucoup pour cet échange extrêmement riche. Je voudrais revenir sur la crise du Covid, qui a montré, si besoin était, à quel point nos sociétés, nos économies sont interdépendantes. Au-delà des enjeux classiques de travail décent sur les lieux de travail, dans les chaînes d'approvisionnement mondiales, le contexte pandémique exige de nous de multiplier nos efforts, de frapper encore plus fort, et le VZF pourra être un outil encore plus puissant pour assurer des conditions sûres et saines à nos concitoyens qui sont confrontés à une crise sans précédent, mais surtout une crise qui change considérablement leurs conditions de travail, et en particulier les conditions de travail des plus vulnérables. Je pense que le VZF serait bien avisé pour lutter contre le double standard qui a été souligné par certains intervenants sur les chaînes d'approvisionnement mondiales, de promouvoir la ratification des conventions de l'OIT. C'est un point extrêmement important, ça donne le corpus auquel se référer. Promouvoir aussi le dialogue social à tous les niveaux, car le meilleur moyen dans les chaînes d'approvisionnement mondiales et auprès des sous-traitants pour connaître les conditions, la réalité des conditions de travail sur les lieux de travail, c'est d'avoir des acteurs, des organisations syndicales, des travailleurs organisés et des employeurs organisés pour pouvoir nous renseigner, nous informer de ce qui se passe sur le terrain. Et enfin, renforcer les capacités des inspections du travail, car qu'est-ce qu'une convention internationale, qu'est-ce qu'une législation nationale si nous n'arrivons pas à vérifier leur mise en œuvre sur le terrain. Donc, en premier lieu, je voudrais réitérer, avant de vous quitter, l'engagement de la France à persévérer au sein de VZF. Nous démarrons en ce moment, vous l'avez dit Joachim, en partenariat avec vous, l'OIT, un projet de coopération dans le domaine de la construction à Madagascar, où les enjeux en termes d'accidents de travail sont majeurs. Plus largement, la France souhaite continuer de prendre une part active au sein de la gouvernance du fonds et de sa promotion. En second lieu, je souhaite féliciter les organisateurs pour ce forum de haut niveau qui a montré toute la richesse de l'action collective. Les résultats concrets que nous avons constatés durant ces 3 jours doivent nous pousser à aller de l'avant, à poursuivre nos efforts, mais aussi à évaluer ce qui est en jeu pour connaître nos forces et nos faiblesses. Enfin, je voudrais inviter celles et ceux qui pourraient encore hésiter à rejoindre l'initiative VZF et à prendre part aux discussions et aux activités du fonds. Notre capacité à changer le réel dépend de notre capacité à travailler ensemble. Nous avons besoin d'un nombre plus important d'acteurs pour qu'ils puissent nous joindre leurs efforts aux nôtres. Il en va, et on ne l'a pas dit une seule fois, mais de nombreuses fois pendant ce forum, il en va de la vie en bonne santé de millions de gens au travail. Je vous remercie.
C'est à moi de vous remercier, Madame Carver. Merci beaucoup. Dr. Franke, I would ask you now for your final ideas and final words before we close the session in representation of Siemens and the private sector. Please, Dr. Franke.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joachim. Yeah, we or also myself, we are absolutely committed to the idea and purpose of the Vision Zero Fund. And I think this is really a great initiative. And together we need to think about how to enhance the impact of this purpose, of the idea of the Vision Zero Fund. And so for me, I'm in a continuous dialogue with Occupational, who manages the Vision Zero Fund, to think about how to involve more of international companies to contribute to the Vision Zero Fund. And for me, industry, and for us it was really a pity that we couldn't do more, and therefore I think that is one of the topics where we think there is a big opportunity to do more to enhance the impact, and I'm happy to help and contribute to get more international companies on board, and I think Chris is doing the same and is committed to do the same. Chris, please forgive me, but we are already doing that, and I think this is a great chance because we have the chance to create good work, and good work creates healthy and safe environments, and people working in healthy and safe environments, they perform better. So at the end of the day, it's a business case behind. So it's not only humanity, it's humanity, yes, but there's also a business case behind. So therefore, everyone profits out of creation of good work, and therefore I think we should think about how to get more speed on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And it is true that, we are all driving towards the same objectives. Chris, would you agree with this?
Yes, and as closing remark, I would just like to give one example, and it's related to the poll that you just pulled about the COVID crisis. And what I would like to mention is that it started in Belgium, and social partners together made up the COVID-19 prevention guidance for companies. So first it was safe start for companies starting up again after the first lockdown. Later it was about business continuity, how to work safe in Corona times. And that guidance was a very practical one. It was just following a worker throughout his working day, from leaving his home or from teleworking, leaving home, public transport, arrival, dressing rooms, the actual work, the refectories, the sanitary equipment. So we followed this very practical guide made up together by the social partners with the help of the ministry and with the labor inspectorate. And then we made an international version of it with the IOE, That was then recommended by the WHO to companies. And then it was picked up by ITUC, so by our trade union colleagues, who made, meanwhile, a Russian and a Serbo-Croatian version. And then on the employer side, there is now a Spanish version, a German version, a Georgian version. So we're basically all over the world using this tool made up by social partners. It was not government imposed, it was a work of collaboration. And I see that as one of the best examples of what we are capable of if we really join forces.
Thank you, Chris. And I think that was an excellent example of collaboration. Rory, can I also ask you some final thoughts before we close the event?
Sure. I'd say safety is fundamental. It should be a fundamental right. And I think we need ILO's presence to be felt, not just in showcase countries, which it does very well through the Vision Zero Fund, but in every country, because it's not just rich nations or poor nations, it's rich nations, it's everywhere where we have workers where we need ILO oversight, involvement and tripartite engagement.
Joachim, you are muted.
Muted on my side. It happens. Sue, I was asking you for your final remarks before we move on to the to close the session, please.
Thanks, Joachim. I mean, just to echo what Rory said about safety as a fundamental right, that's really important. I think, though, for the IUF, as the Global Union for Agricultural Workers, we do very much appreciate the focus of VZF on agriculture and the recognition that it's a sector that needs particular attention. I think going forward, we really want to build on that. We would like to see, as I said, the expansion more to the plantation sector. I noted Joachim's comments about the commitments to do that. But I think globally, the recognition that agriculture needs occupational health and safety to be improved, that would make it much safer in terms of young workers, would help with the elimination of child labor, and would certainly help those many millions of migrant workers that depend on the sector. So maintaining the focus of the fund on agriculture would be something that we would very much welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. And before closing, I would like to say once again that we took a very good note, not only of all that the panelists have said throughout this session and also the previous sessions, but also to all the questions and answers that we have received from the audience. And now, finally, I'd like to turn to Ms. Vera Paquette-Perdigão, who is the director of the ILO's Governance and Tripartism Department, to close officially this high-level forum, the first high-level forum of the Vision Zero Fund. Ms. Paquette-Perdigão, please, the floor is yours.
And so nice to see faces through the virtual, but I think it was 3 days very filled with a lot of good work, especially the work done by colleagues, but also especially those in the field. Thank you, Joachim, and I would like to start by thanking all the panelists for their participation in this event. In the last 3 days, we have the opportunity to hear the multiplicity of ideas, experience, and points of view on the approach proposed by the Vision Zero Fund to improve OSH in global supply chains. I'm also pleased to hear that in general, the collective action model adopted by the fund is an option, well received by tripartite actors in practically all latitudes in which the fund operates. This is actually a model closely related to ILO's DNA, which, as we know, a tripartite organization. This is also the difference of Vision Zero Fund in relation to other initiatives that aims to achieve zero accidents and illness in the workplace. One of the reasons for the success of many interventions in the field is related to the fact that from an early stage, all projects are discussed with governments, employers, and workers' organizations. The fund strategy strategies, priorities, and even the tools developed are also discussed in a tripartite manner. This ensures that all the fund does is relevant to the needs of all actors in the world of work, and they are realistic. And when we saw the questions, and we saw that we had 60% or 80% of the replies indicating social dialogue is key for OSH intervention, that also gives us an answer how the work is being done in the country. Another important characteristic of the fund is the fact that it's part of the ILO flagship program, Safety and Health for All, which is hosted by the branch, and which brings together the technical cooperation portfolio supported by ILO specialists in the field, in particular specialists covering occupational safety and health, but also social dialogue and other specialists. This provides us with incredible coherence and synergies in the use of knowledge, experience, and resources. This also ensures that the fund is a tool to help ILO member states to promote, respect, and implement international labor standards, the decent work agenda, and ultimately the objectives of the Centenary Declaration. As we had the opportunity to hear since the fund was established in 2015 by the G7 under Germany's presidency and became operational in 2016, the fund has grown from 1 to 10 donors and is now operational in 3 sectors and in 8 countries. We could also hear from the different sessions what the fund has achieved, but also the long road that we have ahead of us to make safety and health a reality to all workers. And we also, with the current pandemic, COVID-19, how the lack of safety in workplace may affect the lives of all. Protecting life and health is a noble mission. So join us in our purpose, and let's all work together to make a healthier, safer world for us, using social dialogue at all levels. And I take from what I heard today, let's team up and act now. Thank you. The forum is closed now.